Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. This is my second TTF conference. I came to the first one last year. I'm not really your typical attendee for these things. I don't really have a background in technology. My main background, my career to date has been primarily around policy, working on things like local transport plans, master plans, things like that. When I did come last year, it was due to my colleague Martin Porter, who's a veteran of many TTFs. He said, based on the department coming, it's a really good way to get an understanding of what policy is emerging and how technology can really feed into things. And I found it really, really valuable to be coming from an area that I knew very little about and how we could apply it into it. So when we went away, we thought about some of the work that we'd been doing over the years, and we thought we probably had quite a good story to tell about how policy and technology, how there's probably been a disconnect over the years, especially in Lancashire, but how we've managed to, not through any type of planning, almost through necessity, how technologies come back into that policy domain and how we've got that. So that's a story we're going to tell today from our perspective, and we're going to do that something we developed called the Future Mobility Platform. Matt Pick from Alchera was heavily involved in that from the data analytical side, so I'm going to give some context about the policy background I've just described. We'll then get to the Future Mobility Platform, and then Matt's going to take over and give you probably that more well-rounded technological area that you're probably more familiar with. So yeah, start things off. I'm going to give you some policy background to this. So I was involved in Local Transport Plan 3, which came out in 2012. And as soon as it came out, it was unfit for purpose. It was written primarily during New Labour, very aspirational to do things. As soon as it was published, we were right into austerity in the coalition government. So because of that, we reacted quite quickly and we developed a series of transport and highways master plans. These were very much centred around economic geographies. They were bringing together spatial planning and transport planning, and it was trying to see really where the pressure will be on the network over the coming years. They worked really, really well. So despite austerity in a local authority context, there was loads of money around. There was loads of competitive funding to bid for, and we were really successful due to these master plans. We had hundreds of millions on growth deal, city deal, housing infrastructure fund. But what we did find was that the master plans were really good for major transport infrastructure like roads and bridges, but they weren't really well suited to some of the things that emerged in the future, and that's what came along. I was involved in the drafting of these projects, and I can probably say now in hindsight, from a technological perspective, there was very little in any of these documents. When did this start to change for us? It was probably about 2018 through the Transforming Cities Fund project. What we did for that, we put a bid in to Transforming Cities. We were successful, and it was for just short of £15 million for an area of Preston, which I'll show you in a moment. The objectives for Transforming Cities was pretty different to your major schemes of the past. It was very much about how active travel, sustainable travel, how you could start regenerating city centres. And we found that really things like the master plans and our traditional policy approach wasn't really suitable for it. So just to show you the context really of what we were trying to do, that's the area that the Transforming Cities was aimed at. It's typical post-war transport planning infrastructure really, where you've got in a city ring road right around a city centre. But what you've got there is, to the left of the picture up to the top, that's leading up to UCLan, where we put in a lot of good infrastructure and public realm there. To the right, that leads through to the Harris Art Gallery and to Fishergate, where we've had a series of shared scheme projects put in over place. So this was, in a sense, the missing link of that. So that was the before, and this is the after. So what you can see, it's a significant amount of public realm. You can see the bus priority in there. It was ticking all them boxes, really, that the Transforming Cities Fund project was looking to achieve. What we found, though, with that, and then this is where technology comes that circle, it comes back into being a driver rather than being something that was led. What we found was the priorities of Transforming Cities were very much centred on things that we didn't really have the tools to achieve. Much of our transport planning tools at the time were very much centered around how we can optimize car journeys. Transforming cities was very much about the opposite of that. It's about how we can get cities better. The objectives were how people can walk around cities, cycle cities, and get around on public transport. Because of that, we had to find some new innovative solutions. It wasn't good enough to build our way out of this, if you like. While building was a key aspect of this, this is where technology started to come into a key part of this. And this is where we lead on to the development of the future mobility platform. I'm hoping already I've caveated that I'm not a technological person, so I can't really talk in great detail on this, but the background of this, again, was led by my colleague, Martin Porter, but he had a real lot of support from Andy Graham, who we heard speaking earlier on this morning on video and in person, and also Tony Brown at Atkins Realis. So they've been really central in developing this. 4 key components of the aspect, UTMC, RTPI. We also then have a real-time model through AIMSOM Live. And then we also have data analytics, which Matt's just going to follow on to me just before that. Before I pass over to Matt, there's probably 2 things I want to say from a non-technological perspective on the future mobility platform and from a local government perspective. The real radical thing for this for me is that you've got areas that we're responsible for that traditionally people weren't talking to each other. At the drinks do last night, I was speaking to colleagues and talking about this, the achievement of getting transport planners to speak to signals people has been a really big thing. And people were saying they've struggled with that in their authority. The Future Mobility Platform provides the context for that. Further to that as well, we're also working with innovative SMEs like AIMSOM Live and also with Alchera as well. So before I hand up to Matt, the final thing I want to say is that this model is fluid as well. You'll see to the right at the bottom, we have something that is the future. So that is things that could, this isn't static, things can be constantly fed into that. And I'll come back to the future just in my final slide. So let me pass over to Matt, who'll give a little bit more detail now on the data analytics side of the Future Mobility Platform.
Right, afternoon all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Matt Pick. I'm the head of business development for Alchera, and we've been fortunate enough to play, a small part in Lancashire's data journey. And as I think you can probably tell from Andy's narrative, the future mobility platform is about Lancashire becoming more data centric, making better use of the data they've already got. And, Alchera is a part of that, but there's lots of other innovative SMEs involved as well. So I don't really want to talk about the product per se, because this isn't meant to be a sales pitch. This is more around what data is, how you can interpret data, and the relative strengths and weaknesses of those data sets. So we've already mentioned a scheme called Friargate, and I want to talk to you a little bit about how Lancashire identified the scheme using data and how the data supported both the scheme going ahead and the performance afterwards. So our platform uses BODS as a primary data set. I should start with that. That's really important. We're very, very supportive of open data and actively encourage more open data sources to be available to allow for holistic understanding of transport networks and performance in its sort of totality. And I think Lancashire's motivation was to replace anecdotal evidence, whether that be from bus drivers or members of the public, and replace it with data. So the ways we interpret data in our platform, I think, is really important in a couple of different ways. So if we look at traditional BODS data in isolation and we look at GPS pings, there are limitations to interpreting the information that comes back. So is a bus late because there's illegally parked vehicles by the side of the road, or is it late because the junction isn't performing optimally? And what we try and do is ascertain in granular detail what is actually happening on the network. So from this, we're able to rank and prioritize the network in terms of both pinch point measures and also economic factors. So as we've already mentioned, as part of Lancashire's targeted improvements, the initial sort of bus research, so the network evaluation pointed to Friargate in Preston being a key part of the network that could be improved. And this selection was supported by evidence to start with. But I think it's fair to say that Lancashire weren't happy to just proceed with an intervention without the monitoring and evaluation being in place, so they could properly understand both the performance of that intervention, but B, the ongoing performance of their network over time, which will degrade and change. So the aim, as we've already talked about, was to improve performance for buses and the general public. Lancashire needed to evidence to the DfT and themselves that the government money had been well spent. And as you can see from the graph in front of you, the average wait time at that junction was peaking at just under 60 seconds. If we pivot forward to after the intervention had taken place, it's now averaging around 30 seconds. So a real major improvement on the network, and something that Lancashire can evidence with data and validate. Actually, they've got a return on investment. So
Yeah, so just to finish up on my section, really, and I started this off really with, we had no policy in LTP3. We had nothing in the master plans that I talked about. That's changed now. The future mobility platform is getting embedded into LTP4. That's going to be one of the key aspects driving that. So we've come that full cycle really about how we had no policy, technology came in to solve a problem that's now embedded into the policy cycle. I think there's going to be more projects like Transforming Cities. The major project Matt and I have been working on for the last 3 or 4 years is our successful Levelling Up Fund bid, where we have 55 million. 20 million of that is going into town centres, again, looking at how we can prioritise bus, walking, cycling, and how we can do that through public rail. So that's going to be, going forward, the future mobility platform is going to be central into that. That goes on to construction this year, ready the year after. So that'll be a key thing. Just for me to finish on the future, if I'd have come to a conference like this 10 years ago, I'd have liked to have seen somebody telling me what they think would have been the next things they need to be ready for. You'll see in our future mobility platform, it's fluid. We can factor in the future into that. So just for me to finish, I want to just lead in and give Matt the last couple of slides just to give us some thoughts on where he thinks the future might go in terms of some of the things like AI that the department were talking about this morning.
Yes, this is super quick, and actually I took note of a comment that was made earlier, or a term that was innovation to impact, and I think it's really important for us to all buy in and understand what the future of the industry might be. I think it's fair to say that transport is massively behind other industries, whether you're talking about telecoms or fintech, in adoption of data and supporting AI. So I just want to touch on very quickly what really AI is in the sector, and also how AI can improve what we're doing and what comes next. So on the screen there is just some capabilities within the industry already. So we're already using things like machine learning for things like M&E on journey times. We can use it to make better use of public money and prioritise investment. But actually, there's a second layer of possibility driven by both more advanced machine learning, but also Gen AI, maybe helping to automate report writing or dealing with future of information requests as examples of the things that Gen AI can help us with in the future. So just a little bit of a sneak peek of something that we've been building internally, working with Lancashire and other local authorities on, is actually we're building an AI co-pilot to allow complex data sets to be interpreted by non-data specialists. So a transport planner, for example, who wants to understand about traffic flows from sensors on their network, and can't get the information they need from a UI that's already available, to actually give them the capability of a large language model to be able to interpret that data for them. But actually returning the answer, not just in words, but actually with the artifacts that support it. So the graphs, the maps, the charts that help to visualize what the information's saying. And I guess just to close from my perspective, it's really, really promising. Certainly when I started in the industry a few years ago, there was lots of talk around data, but very little adoption. I've seen that change, and there seems to be a lot more projects coming to fruition, which is great to see. And local authorities and government in general have never been in a better place to adopt data and use it to support policies and programs. Thanks for listening.